Welcome to the South Florida M&A Advisors Podcast, your trusted M&A team. Here's your host, Russell Cohen.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the South Florida M&A Advisors Podcast. You know, Russell, you're becoming somewhat of an aficionado in the sales of roofing companies specifically, because going back a few months ago, you sold, I think it was $100 million roofing company up in Palm Beach, I believe it was. And now, most recently, you just did another roofing company, $6.5 million deal. So I thought we'd dig into that and talk a little bit about the process and the experience. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Good news.
I didn't, 10, 15 years ago, I didn't expect to, as roofing started to become a vertical in my business, and I'm not really trying to make it a vertical. It just so happens that these last two assignments are roofing. And now I'm like, okay, well, let's start working with contractors more often because there's a big demand for it. So more contractors, so why not?
Absolutely. So what made this roofing company an attractive acquisition? Talk a little bit about the deal, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. So it wasn't as large as the first roofing company that we did in May. This is what is called a add-on acquisition. So the company that acquired Earl Johnston Roofing was Dunes Point Capital. They have made multiple investments. They made their platform, their first move into the space with another company at a higher multiple, just like we did with the larger roofing company. And then what ends up happening is they start acquiring smaller roofing companies for economies of scale because they got their large platform investment, and now they go around. They're buying companies in Florida, basically. At this point, they bought one in Orlando. They got one in Hollywood. So as they find the right investments, they will do add-on acquisitions. And typically, the add-on acquisitions they typically range from 1.5 million EBITDA and probably can go, 2, 3, 4, 5 million. And those are your add-on acquisitions. And when a company is making, 7 to 10, 15 million EBITDA, that's your platform acquisition. That's the first entry of the private equity group into the space with bigger multiples. But this was an add-on acquisition at a lower multiple that we sold the larger roofing company. Equally as important, still as challenging as ever, different issues. But we were able to get to the closing table 8 months after the LOI.
So I know you were representing the seller in this transaction, obviously, right?
Correct. I did have the engagement.
So I'm curious, though, on the other side, on the buyer side, when this company is acquiring these smaller roofing companies, now are they bringing them into the fold of their brand, or did they then continue operating these companies under the previous branding of the other company? How does that typically work?
They are keeping the name the same. They run them independently under corporations, but they have a mother company, and they put the roofing company under it. So yeah, they're not rebranding because you just bought a company that's been in the industry for 40 years, has a recognition of the name, especially with this particular seller, very strong brand recognition in Broward County of high integrity, great performance and work, deliver, old time Florida business owner. So it would behoove the private equity group to start making major changes, especially to the name of the company.
Yeah, it makes sense. I've heard of that company before, Earl Johnston. Is it Earl Johnston or Johnson?
Earl Johnston Roofing. There's
Earl
no
Johnston
E.
Roofing.
Yeah, there's no E at the end.
So in this particular case, because I know you deal with a lot of businesses that build the business up and then they get into their like close to retirement years, and then they negotiate these types of deals. In this particular case, what was the deal with the seller? How did they decide it was the right time to sell for them? Talk a little bit about how they led up to this decision to ultimately sell the business.
Seller was in his mid 60s.
Yeah.
And he started developing health issues, nothing life threatening, but to the point where you don't want to be on the roof.
Yeah.
Does go out on jobs and gets involved. He's not laying the shingles. He lets the subcontractors do that. But, so there has to be an exit. And, and they say if you sell your business past 70, time is not that important to you. You are the business, and you become the legend in your own business. So perfect right time in his mid 60s, because you got to transition 1 to 2 years. In his case, he agreed to stay on for 1 year, which is a very rare circumstance that private equity lets an owner get out within 1 year. Normally it's a 2-year contract. And if you're trying to buy time, your multiple will suffer because it gets risky when the owner leaves. So he did get a 1-year contract, and he will exit 1 year, probably next November 1st, of 25.
Yeah, there's got to be a lot of intricate knowledge within the mind of an owner of a business for I don't know how many years, probably decades. He owned the business and built the business. So yeah, there's a lot in there that the new ownership would need to access, you would think.
Yeah, you got to find someone within the company has to step up, or they have to go outside and have someone fill the shoes of that owner who, is the name on the company, is the person. So yeah, very challenging. But in this scenario, roofing companies are very thought after now because it's in a roll-up phase. So this private equity felt they paid a good price, but also they didn't want to lose the opportunity, no doubt.
So after a year, once he's out, do they still typically communicate with him after the fact? Like is he out after that, or is there something in the contract that it allows access to him to some degree in the case of issues?
A lot of times the owners don't completely withdraw from the business. They might be on a consultant basis. They might go into sales. They might take a break and then come back because they missed the action and they want to keep their mind out.
What am I going to do in my life now?
Right. In this case, I think he'll make a clean break, but will also offer, if they run into issues, I'm sure he'll be a great person like he always is. He'll help them and help try to solve some problems,
So you mentioned 8 months start to finish for this deal, essentially. What were there any unique challenges? I'm sure that things came up over the 8 months. What were some of the unique challenges that you faced while negotiating this deal?
Yeah, so one of the very unique challenges, seller was a C Corp when he started the company, and he converted to an S Corp. And there is a 5-year trail that you can't sell your business or you'll have a double taxation. So when you convert from a C to an S Corp, and you sell within that 5 years, you're going to get taxed at corporate tax and then capital gain. So double taxation.
That's no fun.
That's no fun, especially for a seller. They're counting every dollar. So the deal was scheduled to close in May. We ran into some issues with the attorney as the attorney's health was declining along the way in the transaction. And so it got really slow. And then we end up, people going out of town, people are traveling. This thing got delayed, and we were going to try to close after he was past the 5 years, which then became September. And the deal got slowed down because they own the property. We had issues with the private equity group, give a security deposit or not. We ran into a lot of other issues, and the attorneys just weren't ready with the contract, negotiating the contract, the employment agreement. We negotiated an extremely favorable 1-year employment agreement that exceeded the deal that we sold in the year prior. So a company that was 10 times smaller got paid a higher salary than the CEO that sold a very large roofing company. It was incredible. It was that they wanted the business that badly,
Yeah, sounds like it. What were some of the key factors that led to the success of this deal?
Well, you had a motivated buyer that wanted the company. They were focused, even though they felt that the seller was challenging because he was unaware of the of the M&A process. If you're really this is the first time and probably last time you ever go through it. So it's, the seller decided to take a very slow process to understand it. It wasn't a rush to the closing. A motivated buyer that wanted the company. Timing in the seller's life was correct, even though, he kept saying, I can get more, but I didn't think they wanted to go through the whole process because the Earl and his wife, who are owners of the company, the process is so draining, and they uncover everything to the minutia in the quality of earnings and in the due diligence. I don't think that she wanted to go through it again. It's just so tolling on your life, because you're running a company at full speed, and then you're trying to sell your company, and you're trying to find documentation from 20 years ago that you never thought you would ever, didn't even know you had. So the legal due diligence, the accounting and legal is so tough on a seller. You just want to get the deal done. You don't want to go through it again.
It just came to me, Russell, where I think I recognize, other than seeing trucks go around with Earl Johnston Roofing, I'm fairly certain that I had him on the Good Neighbor podcast when I first started a year and a half ago. I got to check on that, but I remember doing an episode, and it sounds familiar, Earl Johnston. So I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah,
I think I've met Earl, and if I recall correctly, he's a really, really, really good guy.
Yeah, he knows his stuff. He performs very well. He knows the industry, and when you're changing your roof, I mean, this is your house. This is your largest asset. You want to make sure you have a reputable company that will do the job right. There's warranties on the roofs. So you don't. It's not something you want to try to cheap out on. And he's not the cheapest, and he's not the most expensive, but he's fair. He's honest. You're getting one of the last remaining good old boys of Florida of tremendous high integrity in the industry. No doubt about it. They don't make people like him anymore.
What about the valuation process? How did you guys land on the $6.5 million price tag on this deal?
So the seller was, we had about a 2 million EBITDA we were working with, and we were getting offers for higher, but it was important for him to exit quicker. And so the higher valuations were coming in with earnouts and seller financing, higher rollover equity, and he was trying to get the most cash at closing. So in this scenario, at the $6.5 million price, it was a 94% cash out at closing and a 6% rollover equity. So that was the least riskiest part. He wanted to get a deal where, he did not want to be working for a new owner and be held to numbers, because he's never really been held to numbers for himself. He just worked hard and did numbers. So he didn't believe in earnouts. He didn't believe in seller financing, even though that would have given him a bigger number. He just didn't want to be told by another company that you had to do so much in revenue per year. So he ended up picking the highest down payment with the least risk of money. And what was important to him was to be able to exit the business in a year. So if he was able to stick it out for 2 years, he probably would have gotten more money, because 2 years would have mean more to the private equity. He could have gotten earnouts. He could have gotten just a bigger number. So he chose, time was important to him, to sacrifice a little bit on the price. So we had about 20 offers along the way, because we brought it to market in January of 23, and we put it under an LOI February of 24. So there were many, many offers along the way, but nothing really satisfied until we hit that 94% cash out position. So that's important to these business owners. In reality, they'll never cash out 100%. It's always going to be part of a rollover equity, there's going to be earnouts to reach certain price levels. In this scenario, it was purely based on how much money I can get to the closing table and not risk my money in the purchase price.
So important to have a professional such as yourself throughout this process. Obviously, this is a long, drawn-out process in most cases, and so much goes into it, and you bring so much knowledge to the forefront, and you really look out for the best interest of your clients and what their goals are. In this particular case, like you said, his goal was to cash heavy on the end of the sale and get out quicker, and you made that happen for him. You've done quite a few of these deals throughout your career. I'm sure that each deal teaches you unique lessons, things that you learn. What's one lesson that you drew from this deal that you can share that could help potential other business owners that they can keep in mind, I guess, when they're considering selling their business?
It took a lot of patience in this deal because we had a lot of things that we did not expect. In this scenario, he did not hire a M&A attorney. The attorney got the deal done, okay, but it did take longer than we wanted to because time is the evil of all deals. The attorney was a probate attorney, but also had his hands in acquisitions. So when you're dealing with a law firm on the other side that is a true M&A law firm, I felt the other law firm was a little more superior to his law firm because he was more of a one-man company. Okay. So I think it's important that the seller realizes you go to a M&A law firm for representation because the buyer is a professional buyer and they're getting very large law firms that know the M&A process. So that is so important because we probably could have been finished a couple of months earlier. As I mentioned, the attorney did run into some health issues. And so that kind of slowed it down. He wasn't great with technology. He got the job done. I just had to remain calm and let it happen. There was one time that we thought that maybe the seller might switch because the gentleman almost removed himself from the deal. So we got to that point, but he was able to stay in the deal and get it done. So yeah, the lesson to be learned is get a M&A law firm because they're on the other side is even a bigger law firm on the buy side. So and we worked really well with them. They did a great job. They wanted to get the deal done. They were not impeding the deal. It just took more time, basically.
Well, good stuff, Russell. Again, congrats on the new deal. I'm waiting for the third roofing company. The trifecta is coming down the pike. I know it's in the works.
Yeah, we don't have any roofing engagements on the books yet, but we do have a large plumbing contractor. So hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll be talking about that.
Perfect. Sounds good. Brother, always a pleasure. And thanks everyone for tuning in. And we will catch you all next time on the next episode of the South Florida M&A Advisors Podcast. Everyone take care. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the South Florida M&A Advisors Podcast. For more information, visit southfloridama.com or contact 954-646-7651.